Ever since our first president, George Washington, the United States has been involved in foreign intelligence activities. It wasn't until World War II that the U.S. began coordinating them on a government-wide basis. Franklin D. Roosevelt asked William J. Donovan, a New York lawyer, to draft a plan for an intelligence service. The Office of Strategic Services was established in 1942 and was commissioned to collect and analyze strategic information required by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to undergo special operations. In 1945, the OSS was abolished, but the need for a post-war centralized intelligence system was clearly understood. The OSS became the Central Intelligence Group, established by Harry Truman in 1946, after a revision Donovan made by proposing an organization which will procure intelligence both by overt and covert methods, and at the same time will provide intelligence guidance, determine national intelligence objectives, and correlate the intelligence materials collected by all government agencies. He also proposed that the new agency have the authority to conduct subversive operations abroad, but have no police enforcement functions. The CIG was to be under the direction of a presidential representative and the Secretaries of State, War, and Navy. 20 months after its conception, the CIG was disestablished. In 1947, the National Security Act was passed to promote the national security by providing for a Secretary of Defense, for a national military establishment, for a Department of the Army, for a Department of the Navy, and Department of the Air Force, and for the coordination of activities of the national military establishment with other departments and agencies of the government concerned with the national security. The Act provided for the creation of the National Security Council and the CIA. In 1949, the Central Intelligence Agency Act was passed, permitting the CIA to use confidential, fiscal, and administrative procedures, and exempted the CIA from many of the usual limitations on the spending of federal funds. In order to protect intelligence services and methods from disclosure, the 1949 Act further exempted the CIA from having to disclose its organization, functions, names, officials, titles, salaries, or numbers of personnel employed. Since then, the CIA has been involved in a number of countries such as Chile, Cuba, Vietnam, Guatemala, Iran, and Afghanistan. One of the first CIA initiatives was Operation PB Success, which planned to arm and train a liberation army of about 400 fighters, led by an exile Guatemalan army officer, Colonel Carlos Castillo Armas. The CIA had suspected the Soviet Union using Jacopo Arbenz Guzman as a political puppet, and the liberation attempt overthrew him in 1954. PB Fortune and PB History were two follow-up objectives that were intended to find documents showing that the Soviet Union was indeed present in Guatemala. The operations liberated over 150,000 papers, none of which indicated Soviet involvement. In Vietnam, the Phoenix program was used to collaborate with the South Vietnamese to identify and neutralize, as in capture, force surrender, kill, or otherwise interrupt recruiting and training headquarters, as well as factions that supported the war effort. Operation Ajax in 1953 was a covert cooperation in Iran by the United Kingdom and the United States to remove the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh from power. Reasoning behind the intervention included Mossadegh's socialist political views and his support of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which thought contracts with Britain were unfair. As a result, 5 major U.S. oil companies were given licenses to operate in the country alongside AIOC. Project Food Belt in Chile was started when Henry Kissinger came to the CIA officials and told them that President Nixon had decided that an Allende regime in Chile was not acceptable to the United States. The president asked the agency to prevent Allende from coming to power or to unseat him. The CIA released several small teams into Chile to create propaganda operations that were designed to push the president Eduardo Frei to support a military coup which would prevent Allende from taking office on the 3rd of November. Often said to be one of the biggest mistakes of the CIA happened during the Carter presidency, when the CIA initiated training, arming, supplying, and supporting of the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan. These soldiers were sent against the Marxist regime and later the Soviet Union. The Mujahideen, trained by the CIA, is now what we know as the core of Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. CIA has been involved in many controversial things, such as drugs, assassinations, and the supporting of dictatorships. Today, the CIA is actively involved in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and will be until the War on Terror ends.